This lecture is also a precourse to a book I'm in the process of writing, where I dig into the positive effects cosplay can have on a person's well-being. So, alright, without further ado, let's get started. I'd like to start with a small presentation of myself. Like I said before, my name is Lachlan. I've cosplayed for about 12-13 years now, and I've done all sorts of things related to cosplay. I've been a member of a couple of cosplay groups, a couple of YouTube channels, and I've competed a little, and in the recent years I've been active with creating convention entertainment. I really do enjoy performing in most shapes and forms, and you all are the subjects of my first lecture, so I guess we're doing something new today. As I've been writing this lecture, I've also been finishing up my bachelor's degree in visual communication, and I'm really hoping that none of my teachers are here to watch this PowerPoint. While I'm glad to have had that academic journey with its ups and downs, I'm a lot more thrilled about cosplay. Surprise, surprise. One of my favorite parts about cosplay is makeup, and it inspired me enough to actually get an education as a makeup artist, which I've used to publish an ebook about cosplay makeup. But enough about me for now. Okay, so who here has had to explain to a parent or older relative what cosplay is? Yeah. And I'm sure it's like really explain. Like, why do you want to dress up as a fictional character and why it's not a completely mental thing to do? I know I had. I remember being 16 and telling my mother I wanted to travel 5 hours by train to dress up as the human personification of the country of France. She said I was sort of a reverse transvestite. To be fair, she didn't really have a problem with that, so I guess there was something going for me. My dad, on the other hand, tends to have the reaction of, damn, that's cool, to most things. And cosplay was no different. Here are some of the pictures he's taken of my cosplays in the years between then and now. I didn't have a super easy time growing up, and though he was supportive, my dad was away with work a lot of the time, and my relationship with my mother wasn't the best. I struggled a lot with identity, even before I knew that identity was the thing that I was struggling with. Since I wasn't quite sure who I was, I had a lot of trouble making friends. And my social skills were subpar, to say the least. What I did love, though, was dressing up. But there comes a point in a kid's life where dressing up is not something else that your peers around you do. And that's, of course, until I discovered cosplay. Suddenly, there were other people who were interested in the same thing that I was. And I didn't have to know who I was, because I knew the character that I was pretending to be. I could both literally and figuratively try on different roles and personalities until I found myself. And it turns out I wasn't just raised in a gender role that was completely wrong. I was also dealing with unmedicated bipolarity, health anxiety, and eating disorders. A certified not good time. And I know I've been talking about myself a lot, but that's because I believe that I'm not the only cosplayer who struggled with these things and struggled with their identity, or who had a difficult time growing up. The sort of safe haven I found at conventions was because there were others who had experienced the same. Not necessarily the same struggles, but similar enough. Similar enough that maybe the way I stumbled across the exact thing that led me to figuring out myself can be actually understood, so that it doesn't need to be stumbled upon, but can be actively applied. So, breaking up cosplay into its building blocks can be quite difficult, but I do have 3 of them that I feel encompasses a lot of what cosplay means to me. It may be different to you, but I hope at least one of these building blocks resonates with you. As you can see, they are roleplay, costume, and community. In the beginning of my cosplay journey, roleplay was crucial. It's still something I'm glad to take part of, but it was really part of my lifestyle in my late teens and early 20s. It didn't matter if it was in or out of cosplay, if it was in person or over text. I wanted to roleplay all the time. Roleplay is largely to thank to the fact that I have any sort of social skills at all. And to tell you the truth, I had no idea what a fantastic tool I had discovered. In fact, roleplay is used as a tool by teachers in all sorts of fields. It's used as a part of therapy as well, for any number of different issues people may be facing. And why is that? Following is a quote from the Sheffield Hallam University. Roleplay is a technique that allows students to explore realistic situations by interacting with other people in a managed way in order to develop experience and trial different strategies in a supported environment. So, roleplay is effectively trying on a role in an environment where you don't have to face the social consequences for it. You get to tweak your personality like a character creation menu, and you get to express emotions in a way you normally wouldn't or couldn't, knowing that the anger or grief or ecstasy you're feeling isn't really yours. And if you don't like it, you can trade it in for something else. The quote continues. Depending on the intention of the activity, participants might be playing a role similar to their own, or could play the opposite part of the conversation or interaction. Both options provide the possibility of significant learning, with the former allowing experience to be gained, and the latter encouraging the student to develop an understanding of the situation from the opposite point of view. So, not only can you choose to try on roles you might want for yourself, you can also try on ones you don't really understand or connect with. One that, when you're standing there wearing it, makes you understand your fellow humans a bit better. I personally have a really, really hard time getting angry, even when I know it's justifiable. Because of that, I had, and still have a hard time dealing with people when they're angry. Allowing myself to step into that role of justifiable, consequence-free rage, I saw what the role I played at the moment needed. And that's the way I try to approach people whom I care about when they're angry. It doesn't always work, believe me, but it's so much easier to handle a strong emotion from someone else when you yourself can see that emotion as a legit way of feeling. So, what do you do if you want to start roleplaying? There are several different ways of roleplaying, and some may fit you better than others. Let's start where this all comes from, roleplaying in cosplay. When I just started out, Hetalia was all the rage. If you don't know what Hetalia is, it's an anime and manga with personifications of countries. It's bite-sized and humorous, but since it was based on real countries, you could add in a lot of personality and details to them in that way. It also made it really easy to interact with others who cosplayed characters your character knew. I could walk up to people I had never met before and start interacting as the character I was cosplaying. I realize it's not that easy in most fandoms though, but it can still definitely be doable. Let's say there's a meetup for the fandom you cosplay in at a convention, and it has a Facebook event, or something like that. Try writing a comment like, hey, I'm going to be cosplaying this character, and I'm looking for these characters for a roleplay after the meetup. We'll be recreating this scene, or a coffee shop AU, or something else. The important part here is that you have an idea about the scenario you'd like to roleplay. And don't be discouraged if it doesn't pan out the first time. If you're not used to role-playing, it can be very hard being the one who's setting it up, or planning it. And maybe it's something to revisit after you've tried role-playing in different settings. Let's look at some of the pros and cons for role-playing in cosplay. It's really fun, if you find the right people. It can also be one of the most immersive ways of role-playing, one of the ways you use both your body and mind the most to get as far into character as you can. Unfortunately, it can be really hard to find the right people, and if you meet them at a convention, you might have to wait a long time until you can roleplay with them again. One of the other most common ways to roleplay is in Dungeons and Dragons or other tabletop RPGs. Since there are more than one aspect to focus on, the roleplaying doesn't need to be fantastic when you start out. Since you can just explain what your character is doing instead of playing it out. And once you're more comfortable, you can add in more and more of the actual roleplay. One of the most obvious pros for Dungeons and Dragons and similar games is that it's easier to get into at the beginning. There are a lot of people who play TTRPGs, and chances are you already know someone. You also don't need to be skilled in roleplaying to start off. Some groups focus heavily on the roleplay, while others describe the way their characters act instead of acting it out. And there are groups all between those two extremes. The downside is, of course, it can be hard to find a group that has the same level of roleplay that you are looking for. Okay, we have a couple more different ways to roleplay. LARPs, or live-action roleplay, is another common way of roleplaying. A lot like roleplaying in cosplay, you use yourself as your character in a predetermined setting. LARPs tend to be on a bigger scale, and often don't utilize finished characters in the same way that cosplay does. You have to create your own within the world of the LARP that the LARP is set in. And this is another hugely immersive way of roleplaying. It's as if you were roleplaying in cosplay at a convention, but the whole convention was in on it. You also get to create your own character, and nobody can come and say, well, actually, that character's jacket is another different shade of green than the one you're wearing. Unfortunately, though, it might be a long while between the sessions, and there are also a lot of costs starting up. Then you have the MMORPGs, or massively multiplayer online role-playing games. You have World of Warcraft, The Elder Scrolls Online, RuneScape, and many, many more. Unlike the ones I mentioned previously, these are in the most text-based roleplays, in worlds where there are a lot of other different things to do than just roleplay. It's something you can do from the comfort of your own home, in front of your computer. My favorite things with these kinds of roleplay is that you can do it anytime you want. You just need to log onto your computer and start the game, and there are bound to be people who are itching for some roleplay. You just have to find them. You can also play in a group or one-on-one, depending on what you feel like. I was a member in a guild in World of Warcraft that was exclusively for roleplaying, and I could roleplay basically whenever I wanted to. Unfortunately, these communities can also become really toxic, and I've had to take breaks from them for a long while because it just wasn't worth the drama. Last but not least, we have other text-based roleplays. This can be anything from a Facebook group to Discord messages. Way back in my Hetalia phase, I used Facebook to roleplay a lot, setting up profiles for my characters, and just befriending others who were roleplaying the characters I wanted to roleplay with. When I was active within World of Warcraft, I often took roleplays out from the game and continued them in Discord, giving me a lot more time to respond and the ability to write longer messages. Roleplay over text gives you both the possibility to be thorough, writing how your character feels and what they do, and it's not on a time constraint like it would be if you were playing IRL. It can get a little monotonous though, as it's often one-on-one roleplay, and once you've gone through the storyline, it has a tendency to fizzle out. Okay, I know that was a lot of roleplay and not so much cosplay, but we're swiftly moving back to trying on things literally. Costume is so integral in cosplay that it makes out the first 3 letters of the name. And it's quite hard to cosplay without wearing a costume. But what does it actually mean to put on a costume, to become someone else for a while? It changes your appearance, but what else happens in your body? I want to start off this section with a quote from Tumblr, something I'm sure at least some of you remember. I once had to rush back inside a convention hall at the con, as the con was closing in order to retrieve a sick friend's medication. And I didn't understand why people in the crowd were jumping out of my way. Literally, one guy vaulted a table, until I realized I was dressed as the Winter Soldier and doing the murder walk, because that's just how I walk in those boots. I got the meds, got out, and made a mental note. I repeated the experiment later, wearing the boots but otherwise my usual clothing, and mimicking the expression I had at the moment. People parted like I was Charlton Heston. I'm sure you've all noticed that different clothes makes you feel different. Like the sweatpants versus your fanciest outfit is a given difference. But does it really make that much of a difference? Like people actually jumping over tables to get out of someone's way just because of the boots they were wearing? Actually, yeah. This is a scientific phenomena called enclothed cognition. What you wear directly affects the way you act and feel. An experiment done in 2012 consisted of 74 people who were randomly assigned into 3 different groups, where they carried out the same tasks. Group 1 wore doctor's coats, Group 2 wore painter's coats, and Group 3 wore their own clothes, with a doctor's coat visible in the room with them. The success rates varied wildly between the first group and the 2 others, despite the fact that the doctor's coats and the painter's coats were the exact same coats. So, if your ability to carry out a task varies when you're wearing the exact same thing, but just think it's associated with another profession, just how much does it affect yourself when you transform yourself toe to toe into another character? Quite obviously, a lot. If you cosplay a character that you consider to be intelligent, powerful, and charismatic, you're going to not only feel like you're smarter, stronger, and more attractive, you're going to be that to both yourself and others. But what about instances where it's not if something is good or bad, where it's the difference that isn't really relevant to the outside world, but can be very meaningful to you as a person? For example, being seen as a man versus a woman. There's nothing bad about either of these. But for many, it's quite important, myself being one of those. I started cosplaying around 16, and I figured out I was trans around 22. An overwhelming amount of my cosplays has been men, more so when I started out than now. When I started, I identified a lot with the characters that I personified, like a lot. I roleplayed as them both online and in real life, had more relationships as characters than I did myself, and generally preferred being them over being myself. I owned a binder for years before I came out as trans. I wished I was these characters so much, but it took me such a long time before I realized that I could change myself to fit better who I was on the inside. I didn't tell my psychiatrist I wanted to be an anime boy. I think in general that's not going to give you the results you want. But I was allowed to be an anime boy in a safe setting for years before I came out. Before I realized I didn't have to wait until the next con to be called he, him, son, brother, boyfriend, daddy. Jokes aside, the costume you put on is so much more than the fabric it's made of. It's a second skin that's yours entirely to slip in and out of. So, how do you decide what to cosplay? It may sound super obvious at first. You just pick a character you like and make the outfit, right? But that doesn't guarantee you'll have a cosplay you feel comfortable in and want to wear. I know I've bought cosplays I've been super excited about, only to realize they look terrible, at least in my own opinion. One good place to start is the clothes you wear in your day-to-day wardrobe. What are you comfortable in, and which colors do you tend to wear? I'm definitely not saying that you should only wear cosplays that you could find in your regular wardrobe. That would be a little boring. Instead, let's make this a Venn diagram and move things around a little. Alright, so the clothes you're comfortable wearing and the clothes you want to wear come together in the middle to create your current wardrobe. You probably have some clothes on either side, some that you wouldn't be caught dead in, and some that you really want to wear but aren't quite comfortable in. Okay, so what happens if we put in a third circle? A circle just regarding cosplays. Now there's an intersection between the comfortable clothes and the cosplays that I'd like to say is the safe zone when picking out a cosplay. These are the costumes that you know you will be fine to wear, but they don't really make you excited or challenge you. Thank you. Okay. These are the costumes that you know will be fine to wear, but they don't really make you excited or challenge you. In between cosplay and the clothes you want to wear, though, is the zone of experimentation. These are the things you really want to wear, but there's some sort of hesitation. Maybe it's too revealing, too bold. Maybe it's a series nobody knows about, so you don't feel like there's any point bringing it to a convention. Whatever the reason is, I think it's important to reach into this zone and poke around, give it a try, and figure out if you can make it a costume that you would dare to wear. That would move it into the golden space, the convergence of all these three circles. A cosplay you're comfortable wearing and excited about. It's likely that the comfort cosplay zone won't go anywhere, but if you're lucky and work on it, you can work both clothes you want to wear and cosplays you're interested in closer to the golden zone through that zone of experimentation. I'm putting it this way in a very un-cosplay-y way because I know these zones look nothing alike when you compare two people. There are so many choices, and I hope scaling back the actual characters and fabrics and wigs from the chart, it's easier to insert your own thoughts and feelings about it. A good start is to just draw this up and then list the characters and cosplays that come into mind into the zone that they're in for you, to maybe make a little more sense of what it is you actually want in a costume. Now, on to the third part. Community. Not the show, though I do highly recommend it. It's a quite clear concept on the surface. Without a cosplay community, we wouldn't have things like conventions and meetups, along with all the cosplay-related groups on social media. I didn't really have a community before I started cosplaying, at least not one that I chose to be a part of. But cosplay helped me break out from my shell and start enjoying interacting with other people. Quite naturally, it's easier to get along with people who you have things in common with. It doesn't take a genius or a lecture to realize that. A study done for the University of Kansas put it this way. That's the cosplay community. They put it this way. You try to create a social world where you're comfortable, where you succeed, where you have people you can trust and with whom you can cooperate to meet your goals. To create this, similarity is useful, and people are attracted to it most of the time. This sounds like something good, right? Getting along with people who think and do similar things that you do. Well, it is good, but it's not good if that's the only community you have. University of Kansas continues. Getting along with people who aren't like you is really useful. Friends are for comfort, taking it easy, relaxing, not being challenged. And those are good things, but they can't be the only thing you need. You also need new ideas, people to correct you when you're loony. If you hang out with only people who are loony like you can be out of touch with the big, beautiful, diverse world. A lot of us who go to conventions and who cosplay have at one point or another considered ourselves outcasts. There is something in us that was attracted to a made-up world instead of the big, scary one outside. And because of that, a lot of us feel like we are, or were, the underdog. But we can't forget that we carry the real world with us, in our beliefs and how we were raised. And if we scale back everything else that we do have in common, in reality, it's not a lot. It's a few strong things that we have in common that makes us part of this community of cosplay, of convention goers, of our specific slice of nerdiness. But that also means that there are a lot of things we don't have in common. I've not lived the experience a cosplay of color has, or a disabled cosplayer has. I have privileges that make me blind to the difficulties of others that I have to learn to be gracious about. The same way that I want cisgender people to listen to me when it comes to trans-related issues. I'm not going to list all of the specific differences that exist, because then we'd be here all day. But I do want to make the point that this community has both strong similarities and differences that force you out of your comfort zone. And I think that's amazing. A magazine aptly named happiness.com published a list of 7 benefits from having a community. I want to just run through them quickly, as I found it to be a very well summarized list. Number 1, support and safety. Quite naturally, if you're among people who care about you, or at the very least care about the same things that you care about, you'll easily get support when it comes to the similar interest by most, and on more personal things with those whom you may share more with. Number 2, connection and belonging. This one to me feels so cosplay specific. Even in a sea of cosplayers I don't know, I can still feel some sense of belonging. The chances of sparking a connection with someone else who cosplays from the same franchise that you do is so big because you already have something in common. Number 3, influence. And this is influence on a friendship level, which is more about developing habits that are good for you. Maybe a friend of yours is doing a project and you tag along, learning something new. Maybe you get inspired to compete because someone you got to know tells you what a rush it is. Number 4 and 5, sharing and learning. If you walk into a room full of cosplayers getting ready and you say, I forgot my wig cap, you'll get about 1 million in about 2 seconds. But sharing isn't just about physical items, of course, but also ideas and concepts and knowledge. Number 6, acceptance. Like I talked about before, open conversations about differences can lead to acceptance on a level that's way greater than what you can find in a school or at a workplace. This article also says, acceptance doesn't necessarily imply agreement. You don't have to fully agree with others to accept them, and you don't have to fully understand yourself to accept who you are. And number 7, more connections, more chances of success. I'm a person who really likes making projects and jobs out of my hobbies, and I've tried very much to keep that out of this lecture because it's not really relevant to the cosplay and mental health part. Except maybe right here. If you were at the opening ceremony yesterday, you saw me and Mimosa over there doing a skit. I started out as a member of the Kodashikon show crew in 2017, and since 2019, I've been the leader of it. Lost Confusion, I was in charge of the stage entertainment, and this year I am here, doing exactly the things I want to do. I'm not saying that you should all go and try and make a hobby into serious projects, but I am saying that it's possible if you want to. Okay, so we've covered that having a community is good for you, both as reassurance and support, and to challenge yourself. But how do you find one? Of course, we are part of a community right here at the convention, but that doesn't necessarily mean you find the specific people to connect with. Sometimes you're lucky and you join an existing friend group and get along great, but that's a long shot and it's not really a plan. The first step to finding or creating a tight-knit community is to reach out. This can be from anywhere to anyone. Say you join a club, or get enrolled in a play, or find your kindergarten friends on Facebook. Maybe someone in a convention group asks if there's anyone interested in role-playing with them. If you don't reach out, or respond to someone reaching out to you, it's going to be really, really hard to make that connection, but you yourself can make it easier. A good rule of thumb when it comes to finding people you want to hang out with is to look through something specific that you want to talk about. If you can't wait to talk someone's ear off about a specific anime, look for people who also want to talk someone's ear off about that same anime. And you don't have to have everything in common with them. The more you have in common, the more you can talk about, of course. But it's good and healthy to have a couple of random friends who you only speak about one specific thing to. Finding a community where you're a bunch of people all interested in the same thing and all get along is not easy. But the more people you have in your life, who you know you'll have something in common with, the bigger the chances that you'll collect a couple of friends and form a strong group with them. Friendship, and in extent, fitting into a community, is a skill you need to hone to be good at. Like a lot of things in life, you might break a couple bonds and hurt some people. You'll probably get hurt yourself. You'll get better and you'll learn from those mistakes. I've hurt people, and I've had the luck to bond with some amazing people. And you kind of have to take one with the other. I think the conclusion that I'm trying to make is that cosplay is good for you, if you let it be. It can be ridiculously useful and implemented in almost all aspects of life. I've tried my best to bring in legitimate sources as a backbone, but I'm also heavily skewed in my belief that cosplay can be wonderful for your mental health, and numerous other things. You're creative people, you're in a creative environment, and you're capable of so much more than you think you are. I'm going to open up for questions in just a minute, but I do want to say a few words about the book that I mentioned in the beginning of this lecture. The title, or at least the working title, is What I Wish My Parents Knew About Cosplay, and dissipates cosplay into many more tidbits than the 3 building blocks I mentioned here. It'll also draw parallels to other hobbies that relate in that particular slice of the pie, like a deeper dive into the different ways you can roleplay than the parts I mentioned here. In the summer of 2022, I received a scholarship specifically for this project, which was a great starting point to get writing on it, and to figure out what to include. It's in the loosest definition of self-help, but more so a source of information and inspiration to figure out how to get past bumps in the road of your mental health. It's also, as the title suggests, going to be an awesome Christmas gift to whatever older relative thinks cosplay is a bit of a silly idea. And yeah, that's it for my lecture. Thank you very much for listening.